cases that could go on, well, for quite some time, especially if the Trump lawyers have their way. Meanwhile, the focus on the former president's legal cases, there are 4 big ones involving 91 charges, again, across 4 humongous criminal cases that could go on, well, for quite some time, especially if the Trump lawyers have their way with trying to push at least some, if not all, of these back. Attorney General Bill Barr, who served in the Trump administration, with us right now. Attorney General, good to see you.
Good to see you, Neil.
First off, on the Georgia situation, Attorney General, and that the Trump people are arguing no way we can do this in March, what the prosecutor is looking to do. It's right around Super Tuesday, but besides that, it's not nearly enough time. What do you think?
Well, I'm not happy with the Georgia case. I think it's much too sweeping, much too broad, excessive case that is make it look like people are piling on and being excessive to Trump and feed the narrative that he's being victimized here. And I also think there's merit in the point that this is a case that I don't think is going to be triable before the election. It's just too sprawling.
Can any of them be tried before the election?
I think the 2 federal cases will be tried, and they are, I think, the responsible cases. They're far more focused, and I think they can be and will be tried before. The New York case is, obviously a political hit job, and in my opinion, it's a joke.
On his business dealings and everything.
Right. It was the payoff, the hush money. And I think at the end of the day, that may not be tried. I think it could just be pushed out because I think Bragg would be worried about actually bringing it to trial.
But even in the case of the one that you argue could be, that is Jack Smith's trial, he wants to get going, in January. I mean, right before the Iowa caucuses. I mean, should they be weighing the timing of either Super Tuesday in the case of the Georgia one or the Iowa caucuses in the case of Jack Smith's one? What?
Well, to some degree, they might accommodate, a few days here and there, but I don't think that should govern the schedule for pursuing these cases. You don't get immunity for 2 years in the run-up to an election just by saying, hey, I'm a candidate, you can't try me. These investigations have been going on for a while. Everyone knew about them even before he announced his candidacy. So if there's a chance to get it resolved before the election, it should be, because the American people should know these are crimes that involve, or potential crimes that involve, moral turpitude.
Now, the former president has a very different view on this, that this is a pile-on, that this is very unfair. He's not even a fan of you being here on this show today, that pile-on is part of a process, and a well-designed one.
Yeah, well, as I say, yes, he has adversaries who are unfair, excessive, obsessive, and treat him unfairly.
Is any of this stuff, of the cases that you've seen, which are fair or legitimate?
But I think the federal cases are legitimate. At the end of the day, at the core of this thing, he engaged in the case of the documents in outrageous behavior where anyone would be prosecuted. I don't know of any attorney general who could walk away from it. He's not being prosecuted for having the documents. He's being prosecuted for obstruction. 2 egregious instances are alleged. So I think that's a very simple case, and that should be tried. If the judge is anywhere competent, that could be concluded before the summer. And the other case, after the election, in my opinion, he did cross the line. It wasn't just rough and tumble politics. He crossed the line.
When did he cross it for you?
I think the federal case is good. I mean, is responsible because it really focuses on the hub of the issue, which is not just the lies and knowing they were lies, and that's what they allege, but the fact that he used this device of impaneling imposter electors, swearing that they were the electors. But the key point there was they were in tandem with a plan whereby the vice president would use that as a pretext for nullifying the legal and certified votes. So it was a calculated and deceitful plan to remain in office by nullifying and negating certified legal votes. And
was that effort at that time the game changer for you? Like, I want to know when it came time that you were the loyal attorney general, and then you just said, all right, enough is enough, because you resigned. The president, I said he fired you, but you resigned. Yeah. But what do you think of that?
I resigned on December 14th because I thought that at that point the state votes were certified, and that was the end of the legal process.
Right.
And I also didn't like the way he was spouting the big lie. I thought that was irresponsible. But he took it much further than even I expected or anyone expected. And during this time, he was being told by lawyers in the White House that if he kept on doing this, he would spend the rest of his life tangling with the criminal justice process. And that's exactly what's happened. He shouldn't be surprised, and no one else should be surprised.
Well, the fact that he didn't drop things could lead some to believe, and his people who defend him say, that he genuinely did feel that he was robbed, and this was the good fight and the proper fight.
Well, even if he did, and I am dubious about that, but even if he believed that, that doesn't mean you can use illegal means to rectify it. If you think the bank is unfairly keeping your money, there are many things you can do to get it back. You can't go and rob the bank.
So at the time, there was a sense you got from the president, Donald Trump, that you had done a 180 on him. On his Truth Social post, he had said just today, sir, that Bill Barr didn't have the courage or stamina to fight, but he knew what was happening. I canned him and felt really good about it. Now he goes all over the place, especially Fox. I think he's thinking, you're here, pretending he's a tough guy.
Well, he used to say I was a real tough guy. But by the time of the election, after the election, I did part company with him because no one could talk any sense to him, and he was taking things too far. And
but he didn't fire. I wanted to get this clear.
Yeah.
He didn't fire you because at the time you left, he had said of you, just had a very nice meeting with Attorney General Bill Barr at the White House. Our relationship has been a very good one. He has done an outstanding job. As per letter, Bill will be leaving just before Christmas to spend holidays with his family. That doesn't sound like someone who just got fired.
No, he did not. He did not fire me.
So what do you think when you hear that?
But you know, but at the end of the day, I don't really care one way or the other.
Really?
Okay.
But it's still an issue for him today. Your being here is an issue for him today.
Well, I can understand. I can understand his being upset by people speaking out against him. But you know, my loyalty was to the Constitution, and I felt he was screwing with it after the election, and I wasn't going to stand around for that. And he was listening and taking counsel from yes men who had no responsibility and no skin in the game. They weren't officials, and they had no accountability for what they were telling him. And so, you know, I felt it was time to part company.
You also said, and you touched on it just a second ago, Attorney General, that he knew well that he lost the election. You went on to say free speech doesn't give you the right to engage in a fraudulent conspiracy. Explain that.
Well, most crimes, other than violent crimes, involve speech. Even violent crimes, stick them up. But and fraud and plotting and conspiracies involve speech. The federal government has said that knowingly telling lies to pressure people to do things in conjunction with a number of other actions was a conspiracy, a criminal conspiracy. He doesn't have the right to engage in that kind of planning. The plan to stay in office despite the certified lawful votes of the states.
Now, you having parted company with him on this, and of course he comes back at you and a lot of other former cabinet officials. I think there are only about 3 or so who would not dare to weigh in on that. Why do you think that is?
Well, you know, the interesting thing about Trump I've noticed about him is he doesn't have a durable relationship with anyone who is other than people who are financially dependent on him.
Then why did you join him?
Because he was the duly elected president of the United States. He was carrying out policies with which I generally agreed as a conservative Republican. And there was a big lie being used against him to drive him from office, and he was being treated unfairly, and no one from the established legal profession was standing up. And so I felt when he asked me to come in, that I should come in to help the administration stabilize and make sure this thing was handled properly, which I did. But now, after the election, he became the author of a big lie, much to the detriment of the country.
So, General, when you look at where things stand now with these 4 criminal cases, these 91 charges, the odds of none of them, sticking or daunting, to put it mildly. It's happened. I mean, but that's a staggering number. If he is convicted of a crime, the Constitution still says he can serve as president of the United States. There are a lot of even Republicans polled on this issue, half of whom feel that that would be a game changer. A conviction would be a reason that he not be president. What do you think?
Well, I think that's true. I actually think he's not going to be the nominee, whether or not he's convicted. I think over time, as people actually focus on the decision, they will see that he's the sort of the one person who could lose to Biden.
But actually, right now, he's the one person who's the most competitive so far of all the candidates against Joe Biden. In other words, Joe Biden still wins. But with Donald Trump, it's closer than in some of the cases. It's weird. Not in all polls.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat early, and a lot of these other candidates aren't as well known as Donald Trump. And I think when push comes to shove, it'll be clear that there are other candidates who can win decisively. But you know, I think the chances are that he will be convicted on some counts. And
can you see him doing jail time?
But I don't think that translates into jail time.
Why?
Because I think, you know, if I was Attorney General and we were prosecuting him, for example, on the documents case, which is a righteous case, I wouldn't want to see a former president in jail. I think a very substantial penalty would serve the public interest, but putting him in jail has too many collateral bad impacts on the country. So I think that's probably where it would end up.
This gets into a very unprecedented, weedy, dark area, but the Secret Service is there to protect him for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. What would the Secret Service do in the event that he was in jail?
Well, you know, there's ways of having custody without putting him in facilities, you know, in federal facilities. You can have home detention and other things. But
would some people be angry at that?
There might be some
people.
He
is getting treatment, and maybe to your point, because he's a former president. Because he's a former president.
Well, there'll be people angry on both sides. There'll be people who don't want a hair on his head touched, and there are people who no degree of punishment is enough for them. But we can't run the criminal justice process in a fair system if we, you know, heed those extremes.
So let me ask you about that period leading up to January 6th, because I've not had the pleasure of talking to you directly on this subject. There was a change, and for many, Chris Christie among them, his behavior on January 6th is what changed everything. Did you have any hint leading up to that, even prior to the election, that he would respond potentially that way?
I didn't expect January 6th. I was surprised by that incident, and I was even more surprised and repelled by his conduct during that day, especially during the 3-hour period where people were pleading with him to please call on the people to leave the Capitol, and he sat there apparently relishing the spectacle.
What about Republican voters who don't seem to have any problem?
I think there are a lot of Republican voters who have a problem, and when they're actually confronted with, they're grateful for Trump, as they should be, for a lot of the good things he did. But I think when push comes to shove and they're thinking about how to make America great again, anger and, you know, will give way to reason, and they will see that the way...
It's not happening yet. It's not happening yet.
Yeah, but that's because the focus isn't on it. And
all right, so
now,
let's assume you're wrong, that it won't change, and that sentiment will build. And around the time even potentially one of these goes to trial in March or whatever, April, by that time he could have acquired enough delegates to be the Republican nominee. Then what?
Well, if he's the nominee, then the Republican Party is going to have to live with that. I think it's a tragedy because I think from a Republican standpoint, the writing's on the wall. The vast majority of Americans want to send the aggressive, radical progressives to the, you know, dustbin of history. And you look at our races in states like Florida, Georgia, Virginia, and on and on and on. Conservative Republican leaders are winning by decisive majorities. The only place that's not happening on the national level, and that's because Trump is toxic to too many voters to put together the coalition necessary to win a decisive victory.
He'd be the Republican nominee, though, regardless, right?
Well, if he wins the nomination,
would
yes.
Bill Barr support him?
Well, I've already said I would jump off that bridge when I get to it.
But he would be the Republican standard bearer.
That's right. But as I've
You
said,
now, the way you feel now, would you?
well, I'd have to wait and see all the evidence that comes out about his conduct and so forth. Right now, most of it is allegations, but I'd have to wait and see what the situation is. I've already explained that if I thought that one of two people is going to end up as the president, then I wouldn't throw my vote away. I would try to make a decision who would do the least damage to the country. But if there were other options, I would also consider.
Would you just not vote for president? Vote on
No, I think
down ticket?
No, if one of two people is going to do it, I would have to make that bitter choice. But and if there are other options,
But it's conceivable Bill Barr could vote for Donald Trump.
well, I'm not, as I said, I'd jump off that bridge when I get to it.
Okay. Let me step back, Attorney General, and get your sense of this race and where the Republican Party is and what they're going through and threading the legal needle on how far they can support him and will support him, because many are deemed to be afraid of him. Other candidates are deemed to be afraid of him. A couple speak out, like Chris Christie, what have you, Congressman Hurd, what have you, but very few. And there's great peril to doing that. Do you think if the former president is convicted of anything across any of these cases, that changes and they might feel more emboldened to take him on or to question?
Yeah, I think you would start seeing more people peel away. And I don't think they're afraid of him. I think they're afraid of losing his supporters. Right. And I think there's a hardcore of voters, probably I would say 30% of the Republican Party, that'll be very hard to persuade not to support Trump. But I think,
But is that recognizable to you? I mean, we were talking in the green room beforehand. You served as our 77th Attorney General under George H. Bush, then our 85th under Donald Trump. It was a very different party then than now. And I'm just wondering, whatever happens to the former president, where do you see the Republican Party going?
Well, in many ways, I think it's a better party. I mean, Reagan started the process of bringing in the middle class and the working class, and I think we're a better party for it. I think the tragedy is that unlike Reagan, who understood the frustrations of and the unfairness to the working class Americans and had tried to focus it in a constructive way and did accomplish a lot.
Yeah.
Trump just whips up their anger, and anger is not a policy for getting out of.
But he always seemed angry. You know him and worked with him. I mean, was he always angry? Did he get angry a lot?
Yeah.
Okay, that's just, all right. Just wanted to be sure of that. Can I switch gears and talk about Hunter Biden, if you don't mind?
Sure.
You had said not too long ago that the probe is legitimate, but his actions, referring to Hunter Biden, can be shameful without being illegal. What did you mean by that?
Without being illegal.
Right.
Yeah. Well, first, I think there are a lot of red flags. First, the tax and the gun issue, put that aside. I mean, the government's ready to charge them, so there was illegality there. And the question is how thoroughly we've looked at the issue of his financial transactions and the extent to which Joe Biden was involved and benefited from them. And there are a lot of red flags, and I think,
If you were Attorney General in this, would you have already appointed special prosecutor?
Well, if I was AG, I wouldn't have needed a special counsel because I didn't have a conflict of interest. And the investigation was going on while I was there. And I saw, before the election, there might be a reason not to take certain investigative steps to make it public, because it was not a public investigation. After the election, there was no reason to put the brakes on this thing. So I'm worried about what happened.
Are you more inclined now, given some of the revelations and the business dealings, and at least, conversations where Dad was present, that there's enough there that this is of a far greater magnitude than earlier?
Yes, I think it's very hard to explain what's going on here. What were they paying him for? Why set up all these LLCs to put the money through, et cetera, et cetera? And
isn't that easy to track? I mean, can't you track money
That's why
and transfers?
well, no, it's actually hard sometimes to get foreign banks to cooperate with you. It takes some time. But it's been over 2.5 years since the election.
But what would be the dividing line then for President Biden? The money that left Hunter and went to Dad, proof that it went to Dad, or that gifts went to Dad using money from such foreign enterprises?
Well, I think the big enchilada would be a question of whether policy decisions were influenced in return for money. A bribe, essentially bribery.
Do you see anything in the president's behavior today that shows
I don't
might have a different?
I don't want to speculate about it, and that's why I said this thing about that either they're going to have the goods on them, and if Weiss ran this thing down and had a thorough investigation and decided that there was no case, then it still could be shameful, and he shouldn't be fit to be president by selling his office this way.
Yeah.
But it may not have crossed the criminal line.
So when you look at the media attention, and certainly the attention we're getting out of the Justice Department regarding Hunter Biden and attention to that case, and anything Donald Trump and attention to these cases, does the former president have a point to say it's not fair, it is rigged?
Well, I've said all along, and I think most Republicans feel this way, and I think it's true, that there's a double standard, and our justice system is much more aggressive in pursuing Republicans than Democrats. But I don't think that necessarily means that what we should do about that is to let people go because Hillary Clinton didn't get hammered for what she did, therefore we should let people go. But I don't feel that that's the right way to respond. But even if it is, even if you're saying, well, we shouldn't prosecute him, what sticks in my craw and what I think the Republicans have to come to grips with is it doesn't mean, it's one thing to say, okay, he shouldn't be prosecuted. It's another to put him forward as someone suitable to be the chief executive of our country.
When you have dealt with the last chief executive of our country and the rage at you at almost every media appearance, particularly here, and a lot from the former president today, on his site, referring to the fact that we would be talking. Is it something that sticks with you? Is it something, or I know what's going to happen, and I'm prepared for it, but are you?
Well, yeah, it's the latter. I mean, it's the reason I decided that I would ultimately accept the president's request to serve as his attorney general.
Do you regret that now?
No, because in this day and age, given the temper of the country, you have to be willing to just do what you think is the right thing, regardless of the consequences. And at 73, I don't need a new job. I'm fine. So I feel I'm in that position. And I'm not a politician. I'm not running for office. So, I'll say what I think, and I try to be fair and call them as I see them.
But no regrets when you said, yes, Mr. President, I'll sign up to be your Attorney General.
I don't regret, an opportunity to serve the country and work with a lot of the great people that were in the Trump administration. So I don't regret it. I do think that he booted it. A lot of people worked very hard to give him the opportunity for a second term, and it was easily within his grasp, in my opinion. And because he's so self-centered and lacks any kind of control, self-control or discipline, he booted it.
If he were elected president again, do you think he could get good people around him? Or once burned, twice shy, the word goes around, not worth it?
I think it'll be hard to attract people other than people who are subservient to him and are yes people.
You were never a yes person. So I'm just wondering, do you fear an attorney general in a future Trump administration who would be?
Yes. One of the things I'll have to weigh if I'm confronted with Trump versus Biden is my concern of the kinds of people he would have about him. And he was always about tit for tat. It's funny, the Republicans are complaining about weaponization of the department, and I think it's a fair thing to pursue. But Trump's made it clear he wants to weaponize the Department of Justice.
Is that what you think his 4 years would be?
That would be my concern. Among many, yeah.
For you now, to wrap this up, I'm just curious, of all the candidates you see, and there's the big debate next week, And I'm just wondering who intrigues you in that bunch. You know, you've had kind things to say, I think, about Ron DeSantis and some of the others, but you haven't really picked or mentioned a candidate. I'm just
Well,
curious.
I think it's a really good field of candidates. I like, you know, I've already said, you know, Ron DeSantis is a very effective, competent governor who knows how to get things done. No, I think he still has a chance, and I think half of the attacks on him are really the media that want to get rid of him because they want to face Trump. The Democrats want to face Trump. I think I admire Chris Christie taking a stand and telling it like it is.
You and him are the most vocal about your experiences and the turn, and the former president the most vocal about you guys.
Well, we know him the best, don't we? You know, I'm very impressed with Tim Scott. I think he paints a very you know, good picture of where he wants to go and how to get America out of this rut. I like Vivek, you know. Yeah. He's elevated the discussion, very bright and a very strong.
Any one of them becomes president and is looking for an attorney general.
I would do what I tried to do last time, is push other people, and I'm happy outside of government.
Bill Barr, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Former Attorney General of the United States. By the way, many have been asking about the timing of this interview with the Attorney General and the former president's interview on Larry Kudlow. They were not mutually exclusive. This was arranged some time ago, as was obviously Larry Kudlow's interview with the former president. They ended up in the same hour, the same time. No.
And let's watch this video. I hope this will increase your
Practicing the piano.